And so we're going to close it out by thinking about this idea. It seems to me that God has called us to be real and unreal. For instance, you have said, you've heard, we've thought about this before, I'm sure you have, talking about someone, you say, that person, that guy is real. Now you think about what that means when you say, tell me about this person. What do you know about them? They're real. Now put it in your mind what that brings, what you think about. And then transfer it this way, and you talk about something that happened, and you go, that was unreal. There's your difference. Now, I love Cirque du Soleil. I think those are fantastic things. It amazes me what they can do. They keep my attention. Now, they say they're telling a story, but I don't know what the story is. I have no idea. I don't understand that part. I just watch. It is fascinating to me. But it's not, it's fascinating on one hand, but yesterday morning I went to see April Ray's girls, Charlotte and Angelique. They were in a gymnastics competition here in town. And I'm watching these kids do things to me that are just unreal. I couldn't even come close to doing half of what they do. And so when we think about real and unreal, I think you're probably already in your mind getting a picture of what it means to be real and what it means for something to be unreal. And that's what God calls us to be. Now, my friend over here put it this way. Christians are so real that the world thinks they are unreal. I got it right, didn't I? Okay. Here's the thing. The definition of real between us and them, not the same. There's the difference. So for a few minutes, think with me about the concept of real and unreal. So let's define what we all think. When I said in complimenting someone, he or she is real. And what do we mean? Well, first of all, we probably mean they are authentic. They are genuine. You know who they are. They're not putting on airs. This is who they are. It also means the idea that they live in a true way. No outside influences are going to change them. Nothing's going to be different. This is who they are. You see them over here, they're real, true. You see them over there, they're real, true. That's just how it is. And it means also that being real, you're unashamed publicly to say what you think. Not concerned about what someone might think of you. You're not concerned about what they might think of your ideas or of you as a person. You're just unashamed to stand up. When you talk about a person who is real, I think that's what we're talking about. Now I want you to keep those ideas in your head as we look at the text. Now the text before us is going to define what a real Christian is. Let's look at verse number 9 of 1 Peter 2. Number 1, for a Christian to be real, it means a part of a chosen generation. A real Christian lives a chosen life. To choose something is the expression of free will, is it not? I choose this work. I choose this job or this place to live. I choose this decision. So to be a chosen generation means that I have chosen, this is who I am. I am a part of a chosen generation. I loved the way Lonnie described this word. A few of us guys on Monday nights are studying the tenets of Calvinistic thought. And one of the basic tenets is predestination. And what he said this morning was, when you think of predestination, think of predetermined. Because what it means, as he said, God said, if you do this, it is determined that you will be here. That's what predestination in Scripture means. It does not mean that God has already made the choice for you and put you here. It means you make the choice and you will be here. That is predetermined. Chosen generation. A real Christian has made a choice to be in a certain place, and that certain place is the life of the family of God. That's what you're choosing. You're choosing to say, I want to be in God's family. Number two, real Christians live the royal life. The royal life. When you think about royalty, probably most of us think of England. And we think of the pomp and circumstance that's involved in the figurehead more than it used to be, probably. The figurehead of king or queen of England. And you see them at certain functions and the pomp and the circumstance, and that's royalty. What's priesthood? Well, priesthood is a function of intercession. The word means go between or stand between, stand for. And so if a person is a real Christian, they have this royal standing between. I can't help when I think of royal priesthood to think that Jesus is a king and a priest. The royal priesthood. So we have a royalty about us, but we are standing in behalf of. Now granted, in the Old Testament, the priest stood between God and the people, but you and I are priests. And we stand before God for ourselves, going through the high priest, Jesus, both priest and king. Number three, to live a real life is to be a holy nation, to live a holy life. Now this holy life, this holy nation is set apart. I think the word nation may have meaning to it. The word nation, by definition, has boundaries. When you think of a nation, you probably think in your minds where it is or where is it? Sometimes nations change. We don't know where they are. I remember going through geography classes in middle school and high school. I loved it. I loved geography, but the geography of the world is so different than when I was in junior high and high school. I mean, the whole countries are different. Things are just not where they used to be. So the idea, though, of a nation is you think of boundaries, you think of the rule of law, You think of that kind of setting when you think of a nation. So what is holy nation? It's a pure version of that. We as a country are not a pure version. In fact, not possible for anybody to be a totally pure version of that because we're all imperfect. But the idea is we are a set-apart people who have boundaries and who have laws. And if I'm going to be a real Christian, this is the life of real living. Now, because our definitions of real and unreal don't match us and the world, the next thing we see in this text is that Peter is saying to his people, he's going, okay, you're real, but the way you live in the world is unreal. Maybe I could say it this way. Christians, real Christians, live in such a way that people say, I don't get it. Why would you do that? Well, let's notice what he says about it, all right? Before I get to verse 11, notice the end, or look at verse 10, how he defines when I said we live a certain way, here's who we are. He says, one time you weren't a people, but now you're people of God. Okay, you have changed. You've become the people of God. You now are real. I think what God is saying through Peter is, what you were before, not real. This is real. What he means is real life. I think it reminds me a bit of John 10 in verse 10. Jesus said, I came that they may have life and have it more abundantly. More than what everybody else has. More than what you had before. That's what he says here. And in fact, because of that, because we're the people of God, because we are living in a life that is different from, we're now sojourners and pilgrims. Wandering around in a place that does not belong to us. We're not connected. It's not our real home. So what does he say? How is it that the world looks at the real Christian and says, that's just unreal? Why would you want to live that way? Well, look at the first one. The real Christian is called unreal because they fight against their own lusts. They fight it. Most of the time when we look around, what do we see? We see people who are just giving in to their own lusts. We see people who are deciding, I'm going to do whatever I want to do, whatever I feel like, whatever makes me happy. And it becomes a very selfish, individual way to live. And they look at people like Christians who are constantly fighting against it. And they go, why would you do that? Doesn't make any sense. Because most of what they are talking about is based on feeling. Well, if they feel that this is right, that's what they should be allowed to do. Why would you fight that? Fighting against our natural lusts is the real way to live, but it looks unreal to everybody else. But turn it around. How many times have you said, how could they live like that? Because of our understanding of what real is, we look at their choices and we say, That's unreal. Why would anybody want to live like that? When you have two distinct groups of people, Christians, the world, each feels real, and each looks at the other as unreal because we fight against our lusts. Number two, real Christians practice something good when faced with evil. Verse 12, when they speak against you as evildoers, they may by your good works. Now, what is it that the world does? You hurt me, I'm going to hurt you. You come after me, I'm coming after you. Not only that, when I hurt you, when I come after you, it's going to be worse than what you did to me because I'm going to stop you dead in your tracks. He also made, Lonnie did this weekend, reference to understanding an entire writing before you dig into verses. When we understand that the whole New Testament was written during a time of the domination of the Roman Empire and what that meant, think about then what he said. Think about how Peter is writing to people who were being persecuted because they had chosen a real life. And now they're being persecuted. And what does he say? Turn good to them when they do evil to you. And that world looks at that and says, that's unreal. Why is it that you would do that? Doesn't make any sense to us. Number 3, verse number 13. Real Christians are submissive people. And that's just unreal. Now, we've just come through an election time. And every time we go through it, every single time, one group is upset at the results, the other group is happy with the results. That's just how it's going to be. Always is. And we talk about living in America and how difficult at times that it is because of the rules that are made, because of the way people react and how they do. And oh, if we could hear Christians from the first century, and they could do what we do sometimes, they might do this. You poor thing. I feel so sorry for you. Now, they wouldn't do it because they're Christians, but I would see why they would. Man, we don't have near the trouble they did. And when we fight against the idea of being submissive to a government, we're talking about being submissive to a government that allows us to meet in public anytime we want to. We even have a law that protects our right to say what we believe without fear of repercussion. And these people, they had to have church in the catacombs because everywhere they went, there was a potential to be killed. And Peter said, be submissive to the government. And so often, people in the world look at submissive people and say, why would you want to do that? That makes you weak. That makes you unworthy. Stand up for yourself. It's easy. I had a conversation with someone recently. It's easy to do what everybody else is doing. If everybody is being ugly, it's easy to just go along and be ugly. If everybody else is criticizing somebody, it's easy to criticize. Especially when kids are involved. Kids easily get others on their side to badger somebody, to be mean to somebody, to bully somebody. And when you do that, because everybody else is, easy. But how strong do you have to be to stand up to a group and say, I'm not doing that? Nope. Sometimes we give in and do because that's the way to be strong, because then we're like everybody else. They're on our side. That's the way to be strong. That doesn't make you strong. It makes you weak. That makes you giving in. Real strength comes from submission. Real strength is found in the submissive attitude. And the world looks at that and says, that doesn't make any sense. That's just unreal. So why do Christians live a real life? Well, notice how he says what real life does. Number one, real life, verse 12, will cause someone to glorify God. When we live a real life, we will glorify God. Others will. That's the goal. Now, it doesn't mean that every time you live a real life, you will, in fact, cause others to glorify God. But you can rest assured of this. If we don't live a real life, we can guarantee they won't glorify God. It doesn't guarantee that they will when we do, but I can guarantee you they won't if we don't. That's just a fact. And so if I'm going to live a real life, I'm trying to accomplish this idea of living in a way that they will glorify God. Look at another one. Verse 14 or verse 13 beginning uses this idea down in verse 15. Put to silence the ignorance of foolish people. When we live a real life, we have an opportunity to silence the unreal. Do you feel like, just asking, do you feel like there's a change happening? I'm getting the feeling that by and large, the people of our country may have gotten tired of the push that's been made as it relates to the ethics of sexuality that has gone to the extreme in this transgender movement. I think people are getting tired of it. I think they've had enough. But isn't that because people have been standing up and standing strong? I think it is. How are we going to put to silence unreal? Be real. That's how it works. And finally, verse 16. When we are real, we help people understand how to use their freedom properly. Freedom is not just now because you've been free, you just do whatever you want. I'm reminded in this passage of what happens, in my opinion, in 1 Corinthians 11. When Paul addressed those Christians with the women wearing veils, what does he say? Basically, he says, there's no law about that from God. But he said, you need to make sure in this culture you do what's best. You don't want to cast a bad reputation on Christians, on the church. And he said, if wearing a veil brings a bad reputation, don't wear it. But if it brings a bad reputation not to wear it, then just keep wearing it. Why? You're free. In fact, I think that was the question. I think these Christian women were saying to Paul, we've been freed in Christ, and we'd like to quit wearing these veils. Well, freedom doesn't mean you just get to do everything you want to do. Freedom says you have to act in a certain way, and you don't use your freedom as a cloak for vice. Now, close with verse 17. He summarizes the real life in 4 ways. Number 1, honor everyone whom God created. Lonnie's statement this morning about people who have different views from us. I loved what he said and how he put it. He said, those people are not our enemies. You remember that? He said, they are the victims of our enemy. So people who are caught up in all of these unethical and immoral things, they aren't the enemy. They've been trapped by the enemy. Now, we hate what's going on, but we can't hate them. Honor everyone that God created. And that's all of us. Number 2, especially love the brotherhood. As much as in you as possible, live peaceably with all men. Yes. But didn't he also say in Galatians chapter 6, do good to all, but especially those of the household of faith? When I was going to school at the Lexington Theological Seminary, I had a professor who stopped me one day. He's an older man. His last name was Fowler. And he came from, his background was in the Restoration movement, if you will, in the Christian church and disciples of Christ. And he looked at me and he said, young man, I emphasize that part because back then that was true. He said, I miss what you say. And I said, what's that, sir? He said, I remember when my people used to talk about the brotherhood. He said, we don't talk about that anymore. And he said, I've heard you mention that many times. Didn't Peter say, love the special creation of God, the brotherhood? Yes, he did. Number 3, fear God, because he's the creator. And number 4, honor authority, because God created it. Here's how I'll close. We are real because God created us. We live real because that's how he wants his creation to be. But when we do, the world's going to think that we are unreal. Let's leave tonight thinking, I want to be peculiar. I want to be different. I want to live real and unreal. A real Christian has obeyed the gospel, having been immersed for forgiveness of sins. Is that you? If not, you can be tonight. Or you can make that decision in some way that we need to help you, or simply to say, I'm struggling, can you give me some help? Tonight we sing for your encouragement if you respond while we stand and sing.